Let's take a step back into time, even if it's by just a few years, because students across South Africa, you remember, went on those FeesMustFall protests 4 years ago. Their demand was free and equal higher education, and they've largely managed to achieve that. But has the country actually taken stock of how those weeks of protests affected young people who took part, some of them as young as 19 years old? And as we speak tonight, one student activist, Khanyile, recently had to be rushed from prison to hospital for what we've been reading was treatment for a mental health issue. With that in mind, then, let's delve into the mental scars of the FeesMustFall movement. My guests tonight are Bonginkosi Khanyile, who is a member of the EFF, joining us from our Durban studio tonight. We've also got Thabo Shingange from the SA Union of Students. He is spokesperson for the organization. He will speak to us from Pretoria, and then hopefully later we'll be able to bring in a psychologist just to get expert opinion on, of course, the theme of this conversation, which is the mental scars of the FeesMustFall protest. Let's bring up then both my guests, Bonginkosi Khanyile in Durban, as well as Thabo Shingange, who's joining us from Pretoria. Gentlemen, my thanks to you both. So I want to begin with you, Bonginkosi, because you were sentenced to house arrest after the FeesMustFall protest. So when those demonstrations first began, did you think that the situation would get as precarious as it became?
Good afternoon, my brother, and all the viewers at home. No, definitely, nobody thought this thing would lead to a situation currently that we're under. We thought that we're going to push the government, that it delivers free education. Thereafter, we'll continue with our lives. However, the journey has been so difficult because until today, we were still under house arrest. Let me tell you, my brother, I was under house arrest until I set myself free today in a protest of Khanyile. We cannot comply to a government that has made it its business to suppress young people, to traumatize them and destroy them young. Today we're speaking, Khanyile is behind bars. His mental health is deteriorating, and we are supposed to comply to the dictates of that government. I've said until today, I've set myself free today. I'm no longer under house arrest. I'm going to be with those ones on the ground who are pushing for his release, who are calling for his release. The government that is in the forefront of injustice is a government that does not deserve any compliance from his subjects. So we're saying today now, this government has declared war against young people, and it is upon young people to go out and defend themselves. And I hope that young people at home, they're going to begin to start doing something as a rallying call towards Khanyile's freedom, because we owe him his freedom. Today, he has spent more than 2 years inside prison, and we are outside, we are doing nothing. Let's all come together and ensure that we push for his release, because we owe him his freedom. We cannot continue as business as usual when one of our own is inside. We're going to wake up one day, he's permanently mad. What will happen?
I want to come in there, Bonginkosi, and we'll go back to the Khanyile issue later in our conversation, but I want to touch on what you've just said, because you tweeted this about an hour or so ago, that you have now declared yourself officially out of house arrest for the cause of trying to draw attention to Khanyile's plight. But how helpful is that if you are now putting yourself at risk of being imprisoned?
I think, my brother, all of us, we ought to be prepared to sacrifice for one another. If it was myself inside prison, I would have appreciated when young people stand up and do something. We all have a responsibility to sacrifice for the young men inside. I am calling all young people to say they ought to do something. I am doing something. I think this is the highest price I can pay for his freedom while I'm outside. This is the highest price that I can risk. There are two things that when I grew up I always feared, was prison and death. I am prepared to risk prison for his freedom. And I hope that it won't get there. I hope we're going to speak on the consciousness of our government to release a young man who is currently having his mental health deteriorating inside the prison. That is my plea. I've been complying with the state. I've been doing everything they are asking me to do. I've been attending all the classes that they said I must attend of life skills. I've been signing every day. I've been ensuring that I do not take any intoxicating substance unless ordered by the doctor as they have ordered. I have done everything they've asked me to, until one of our own is now losing his head, is now suffering from mental health. Let me tell you, my brother, when you are in depression, once you suffer from severe depression, you cannot take that thing back. There's no cure for such. You can only treat it until your last days on earth. So what do? Do we sit quiet and let our own suffer inside while we are tweeting? Because tweeting and Facebooking and WhatsApping doesn't help. The only thing that this government does listen to is action on the ground. And I'm saying this is the sacrifice I can do. And unfortunately, I do not have those powers. If I had powers, I would have set him free long time ago. Let's all as young people do something. Our small actions can add into ensuring that the young man is free.
All right.
We are doing that on the ground. Let us consolidate the ground, my brother.
All right, let's go to you then, Thabo Shingange in Pretoria. And Bonginkosi makes the point that perhaps sticking to raising awareness about Khanyile plight online through tweets, Facebook posts, and that sort of campaigning is not going far enough to campaign for his freedom. Now, Bonginkosi, has decided to release himself from house arrest, which we all can agree is in breach of the law. Is that what it's come to get this young man freed?
Look, firstly, thank you very much for having me. As a union, we've reflected deeply on the issue around FeesMustFall, and in particular post-FeesMustFall, and some of the, the after effects and the aftermath of having to deal with such a traumatic movement. I mean, I've met Comrade Bonginkosi, we've met before, the time when he was leading a campaign, pardon me, Mr. President, at the lawns of the Union building. So it's had various effects on various people, both directly and indirectly. I cannot necessarily speak over him in terms of the decisions he has taken himself to unchain himself from house arrest in protest and in solidarity with one of his own who is, like he's explaining quite clearly, suffering severely behind bars. As a union, of course, we do not necessarily want to take a very unstructured way towards how we campaign behind the call for Khanyile to be released and all other students whom we have not yet fully identified, to say that we need to create a platform where we have a joint approach, a joint national movement of some sort, an appeal to society, an appeal to law enforcement officers, an appeal to the state itself to say release these comrades, because the conditions in which they were operating were different. The time was very much political. The question around fees was very much a natural question. The times dictated to us the events that unfollowed. It's unfortunate that in the process of the violence that was meted against students, there was violence in response from various factors, and there's a lot of factors that constituted the violence in and of itself. So we need to begin to look more, not by what the law is saying in terms of by the book, in terms of if you do this, therefore that, in a normal situation. The times were abnormal, the context was abnormal, and so we're appealing for a national appeal to say that let's give amnesty to students who are fighting for a basic right of higher education in this particular country. Because without higher education in this country, one cannot go anywhere. It's worse if you are black, it's worse if you are black and woman, it's worse if you are black and woman and living with a disability. So you cannot then subject the very same people who are fighting for this particular right to incarceration, to suspensions, which clearly have mental scars and mental effects on people. And it's not just Bonginkosi in prison who's suffering mentally. There are many other student leaders who post-FeesMustFall are no longer the same. There are many others who are severely depressed. There are many others who have attempted even suicide in the name of FeesMustFall. So it's a very traumatic issue for many young people in this country. And I think as a union, we are at the forefront of trying to appeal to the state. We have been engaging with Minister Ronald Lamola on the question of pardons. We met with him in Cape Town to engage further on the particular matter, to say how do we approach this thing without jeopardizing the particular case.
Bonginkosi, I want to talk then about the mental scars that Thabo is referring to there, because you, yes, were under house arrest, but you had a lengthy criminal trial to face. How would you say you have changed as a person as a result of FeesMustFall, the criminal trial, and your subsequent house arrest? How has it affected you?
There's been a very lonely journey, my brother. You know, when you are under house arrest, seated at home, even those who visit you, they start losing interest on coming at your home and visit you. Remember, I'm only allowed to be at home, and wherever I have to go somewhere, either in the university to continue with my studies, I have to go and ask for permission in the correctional services. It's a very lonely, devastating, and it deals with your mind to be kept in one space. And we are young. We are still in our age whereby we are youthful. We want to engage in activities across the country, but we can't do that because we are under house arrest. Now, what happens further? Now you have a person now who's kept inside prison, and we are all outside not doing enough. We're only tweeting, we're only praying that he must be set out. I think that for me, when I stayed there for 6 months, when I left prison, I was not the same person which I went inside to. In terms of the behavior, in terms of how my worldview I had. Now imagine a person who has stayed for more than 2 years inside prison.
Let me
what
ask you
happens
this,
to that person who has stayed for more than 2 years inside prison?
I want to ask you this.
My brother, come.
Would you say that it has changed you for the worst? Are you an angrier person?
I'm very bitter. I'm angry. I'm bitter, angry, very angry. What would you do if it was you? Because remember, we're only calling for free decolonial education. Upon calling for such, we had to be subjected to prison. Upon prison, we had to be trialed for more than 3 years. I had to attend the court for more than 3 years. After that 3 years, I had to be sentenced another 3 years house arrest, which finishes in February 2022. I'm unemployable. I've been applying in all government departments. I can fill in a Z83 without looking at it. I've been applying, no employment. I'm doing master's degree, but nobody can employ me because I have a criminal record. When I'm sure even yourself would have been angry and very bitter. So I'm very bitter, I'm very angry with the establishment.
Thabo Shingange, you were part, of course, of the student leadership at the height of the FeesMustFall protests. When you look at the mental cost, mental and physical cost that many of the students that you led, such as Bonginkosi, continue to suffer today. As a student leader, do you regret the lengths to which you went during the FeesMustFall movement?
Look, we can never say we regret. It was necessary. It was a necessary cause in and of itself. But the scars are devastating. I think any student who was there during 2015, 2016, 2017 is no longer the same. They've changed. Many are bitter, many are angry, and many just feel, they're in a state of paralysis. Toxic environment. The universities have not changed. In fact, the conditions are still the same. In some instances, the universities have militarized themselves. It's no longer a public university, a public space of academic engagement and intellectuality. It's now, walking through a military base. So, of course, you have signs, you have triggers. I have a colleague who, till this day, when they see a Nyala, the police, we call it a Nyala, that 1976 van, when they see that thing today, she gets scared, she gets nervous around the thing. So people are not okay. Some are suffering, the academics are suffering. The next fight of FeesMustFall has been taken into the academic space. You find many young academics are writing about it, but they too are not okay. They have to relive those moments again. They have to reread the material, the trauma, the racism, the exclusion, the patriarchy, the misogyny, and all of these things that exist in our higher education space. And nothing has changed. The fees are still high. Some are still paying. Some are not receiving their meal allowances. Some can't even access the university. Then you ask yourself the question, the last 3 years, what is that all for? But we can never say we regret it. It was necessary, and in fact, it's not over. The fight for free education in this country is a continuous fight up until we get it right. Because we cannot say really that we have free education in the true sense of the word in this country, when we still have instances of students not receiving their meal allowances on time, when we still have instances of students not receiving their funding on time, their textbook monies on time. So we really need to look deeper into this issue as to what is a working definition of free education in this country that we can all be comfortable with and begin to heal from the scars that FeesMustFall has brought upon many students. In fact, every single student who was around at the time, even after the time, the conditions still remain the same.
Okay, Bonginkosi, very briefly, because you both agree that much of the problems that you were fighting against in 2016, 17, as well as 15 still remain on the country's campuses today. What is it going to take for an absolute change to happen? And looking back at the high price that you paid personally, was it worth it?
The price was much more worth it. Remember, as much as nothing has changed, but we must appreciate that the NSFAS intake has increased. A number of black poor students who come from families that are downtrodden, marginalized, dispossessed, those who live from hand to mouth, who do not know when is their next meal, have now access to education. However, we're saying we want free decolonial education, not a renovated NSFAS. We're saying education must be set free in terms of its content and its monetary value. And those are the things that we need to engage to and push further. For this government, I don't know, because we have written to him, we've submitted memorandums, we've protested, we've marched, we've submitted everything, we've done everything in our power. I think the only thing that can make him listen is when one student burns himself to death. Perhaps this government would listen to. I don't know, because we've tried all in our disposal. I know Khanyile, the minister, is aware of Tegeshe's issue. They're not doing anything. They are aware of the proposal we've tabled before them of how education ought to be. They're not doing anything. They'll listen when something drastic happens. Then they come and say, no, we are a caring government. No, we are willing to intervene. No, we are willing to do 1, 2, 3, and 4. While we are speaking now, we are talking in a situation where it's calm and where everyone can listen. They are not acting. It happens everywhere. Even in the township, they can only listen when someone now is burning tires or destroying a public infrastructure. That's where they begin to listen. And I think that attitude must change. Khanyile must be free decolonial education in terms of its content and in terms of its monetary value must be delivered. And let us continue with our lives as normal.
Bonginkosi Khanyile, student activist speaking to us from our Durban studios. Another student activist speaking to us tonight has been Thabo Shingange. You have been speaking to us from Pretoria, Thabo. Gentlemen, my thanks to you both. I have a feeling we'll be continuing to have much more of these conversations over the coming months. But for now, thank you.